Rachel Zegler is extraordinarily woke, but she's woke in a way that's quite deranged.
And if you disagree with this sentiment, I don't need your business. Thanks.
No one on the right side of America can stand the star of this movie.
A few lessons for Disney. Number one, stop cannibalizing all your old IP. Like, it's really bad. It's really bad business. Number two, please stop changing all of the historic plots which actually have meaning to generations of people.
And to everyone who hates when I win, the winged victory came to the Louvre in pieces, and people still line up to see her. And everything I do, people will wait in line to see.
It had the lowest opening, under 50 million.
I would highly advise that you boycott this film, no matter how much your children love Snow White.
What if one actress could destroy a Disney classic before the movie even hit theaters? That's not a punchline. It's what happened when Snow White, one of Disney's most iconic fairy tales, collided with Rachel Zegler's unapologetic attitude, a wave of fan backlash, and a brutally timed takedown from Candace Owens. What was supposed to be a surefire hit with a $200 million budget turned into a slow-motion disaster. And it all started with a few interviews that went viral for all the wrong reasons. Disney thought they had their next big win, a beloved childhood story, a fresh cast, and a live-action formula that had already made billions. But this time, something was off from the start. Rachel Zegler wasn't just a new face for Snow White. She came across like she didn't even want the role. And that energy, audiences picked up on it immediately. In every press appearance, Zegler seemed to go out of her way to distance herself from the original. She didn't hint at changes. She tore the old story apart. The prince was labeled a stalker. The idea of true love, outdated. The core fairy tale, too dependent on men. And suddenly, what was once a celebration of innocence and magic became a culture war flashpoint. This wasn't just a case of an actress modernizing a role. It was a complete rejection of the story millions grew up loving. And viewers didn't take it lightly. Hashtags like #NotMySnowWhite flooded X. Clips from her interviews exploded across TikTok and YouTube, each one getting worse. And just when things couldn't get any messier, Candace Owens entered the chat. Owens' takedown wasn't some petty jab. It was a point-by-point breakdown of everything that was rubbing fans the wrong way. The entitlement, the smugness, the disdain for the source material. She framed Zegler as the face of a growing problem in Hollywood, a symbol of how legacy films were being rebranded in ways that didn't just update the message, but erased the original magic. And that commentary, it struck a nerve, fast. What followed wasn't a subtle shift in sentiment. It was a full-on implosion. Parents started publicly calling for a boycott. Conservative media picked it up. Even casual moviegoers started asking, what happened to Disney? And while there were plenty of contributing factors, Rachel Zegler was the name attached to all of it. The interviews, the viral clips, the sound bites that felt more like lectures than promotion. She didn't make it easy on herself either. At one point, she joked that she should be paid every hour she wore the Snow White dress. To fans, it sounded like she hated being there, like she was above it. And for a studio that depends on likability and nostalgia, that was a death sentence. By the time the marketing rolled out, the damage was done. Trailers were met with eye rolls, not excitement. Comments were filled with memes, not anticipation. Instead of building hype, Disney had to watch their film become the punchline of a much bigger cultural conversation. And the numbers proved it. Opening weekend? Brutal. The film pulled in less than $50 million domestically. With a $200 million price tag, that's catastrophic. In China, not even $1 million. Fans weren't just skipping it, they were laughing at it. And rumors, though unconfirmed, began circulating that Disney execs were furious. That internally, there were regrets about the casting, about the direction, about the press tour. The kind of whispers that don't usually make headlines unless the fallout is this public. But the real kicker? Zegler wasn't done talking. Instead of going quiet and letting the storm pass, Rachel doubled down. More interviews, more takes, more passive-aggressive commentary about the original Snow White. And every time she spoke, things got worse. What could have been just another forgettable Disney misstep was now being dissected across every platform. Reddit threads, YouTube essays, X meltdowns, and yet somehow her team didn't pull her back. She kept appearing, kept giving quotes that made her seem less like a misunderstood actress and more like someone who couldn't stop poking the beehive. People weren't just disappointed, they were angry. not because she had opinions, but because she seemed to mock the thing people loved. And then came the tipping point. A resurfaced interview clip showed Zegler joking about cutting all of the prince's scenes, not suggesting, not debating, joking, laughing, as if she was the director and not the actress hired to bring someone else's story to life. Fans didn't find it funny. In fact, that single moment, her smirk, the sarcasm, became symbolic. It was the moment that confirmed what many already believed. She didn't respect the story, the legacy, or the audience. That's when creators like Candace Owens really turned up the volume. Owens didn't just point out the disconnect. She treated Zegler's press tour like a case study in Hollywood arrogance. And whether you agreed with her or not, her video worked. Millions of views, countless shares. Owens took what fans were already feeling and gave it structure. A narrative that this wasn't a one-time PR mistake, but part of a larger, deeper rot in the way studios treat their own audience. The fallout was instant. Boycott campaigns picked up steam. Meme pages had a field day. Even former Disney loyalists admitted they were skipping this one. And somewhere in the middle of it all, Disney's silence spoke volumes. No damage control, no real pushback, just nothing. And that nothing was louder than any statement they could have made. The release date kept creeping closer. The marketing was ramping up, but the audience wasn't buying it, literally or figuratively. Trailers were downvoted. Social media ads were flooded with negative comments. Every piece of promotional content was an open invitation for backlash. The original magic had been replaced with mockery, and while fans were ripping apart the trailers, industry insiders started talking. Again, rumors, not confirmed reports, but they were consistent. That Disney had postponed internal discussions about future remakes, that execs were reevaluating their approach, that projects in development were suddenly on ice, not because of one movie bombing, but because this one bombing sent a message they couldn't ignore. And let's be real, even without confirmation, the idea didn't sound far-fetched. When a movie backed by $200 million flops that hard, heads roll, meetings happen, and Zegler's name, it was everywhere, but not in the way any rising star wants. Worse yet, the audience didn't just reject Snow White, they rejected her. The backlash wasn't about effects or costumes or even story. It was personal. Clips of Zegler making jabs at the original, circulating like wildfire. Her offhand comments about streaming royalties dragged on every platform. And the image that stuck? A smug, out-of-touch actress trying to rewrite a beloved story for people she clearly didn't understand. And then came the final blow. Opening weekend. Numbers that should have caused celebration became confirmation. Confirmation that the audience wasn't bluffing, that the boycott wasn't empty noise, that people weren't just threatening to skip the movie, they actually did. Theaters were empty, the merch wasn't moving. The international numbers? Embarrassing. Disney had banked on nostalgia, on families showing up just because it was Snow White. But the backlash outweighed the brand. This wasn't just a flop, it was a loud, public rejection. And Zegler? She was now seen not as a miscast, but as a cautionary tale. As the dust settled from the disastrous opening, Disney found itself in a position it hadn't expected, scrambling to distance from its own lead. No official statement was made, but the energy shifted. Promotional content stopped featuring Zegler front and center. Her presence faded from ad spots. Her interviews quietly vanished from the algorithm. And suddenly, the film star was no longer part of the conversation Disney was trying to have. And that's when people really started asking, how did it get this bad? It wasn't just about one film bombing. This was about the brand, the Disney brand, looking confused, cornered, and completely out of touch with its core audience. For a company that built its empire on generational loyalty, that's more than just a misfire. That's damage, deep, expensive damage. Then came more public commentary. Talk show hosts, political commentators, and former Disney collaborators started weighing in. And the pattern was clear. Most of them weren't even attacking the film itself. They were pointing to Zegler. Her image, her attitude, her endless sound bites that somehow managed to alienate every demographic at once. Parents didn't trust her, nostalgic fans didn't relate to her, and young audiences didn't find her inspiring. They found her condescending. The tragedy wasn't that she had opinions. It was that she presented them like she knew better than everyone. That's what stung. And then, just when it seemed the backlash might quiet down, another clip surfaced. This time, it was a resurfaced comment Zegler made about feminism and how Snow White didn't need a prince. On its own, that wouldn't have caused another uproar. But in the context of everything else, the mocking tone, the smug delivery, the consistent undermining of the original's message, it reignited the flame. Comment sections blew up. Creators jumped on the clip. And Candace Owens? She circled back, doubling down on her original claims and using the moment to point out how quickly modern Hollywood eats itself. She argued that Disney had allowed a star to hijack a legacy property, alienate the audience, and burn a $200 million project in the process. And again, it worked. Owens' commentary became a reference point in every other reaction video. Creators in the movie commentary space, political commentators, pop culture breakdown channels, they were all using her clip as the moment this story turned into a movement. One that wasn't just anti-Zegler, but anti-Hollywood, anti-preachy filmmaking, and anti-reimagine it into oblivion studio thinking. Zegler's silence after that spoke louder than any press statement. It wasn't just a missed opportunity, it felt like an admission. The public had turned, her team knew it, and no amount of damage control was going to change that. Internally, the conversation shifted from, how do we save this film, to, how do we make sure this never happens again? And that's when reports, again, unconfirmed, but widely circulated, suggested that Disney might be looking into quietly recasting or even shelving some future projects that were following similar patterns, not because of principle, but because of math. When $200 million turns into a loss, even the most ideological studios pay attention. Meanwhile, Rachel Zegler, who had once been positioned as Disney's rising princess, was now unofficially blacklisted in the eyes of the audience. You could see it in real time. Brand partnerships quiet, future projects delayed, streaming campaigns softened. Her career wasn't over, but it was clearly on pause, all because she didn't know when to stop talking. And while the internet moved on to its next outrage cycle, Snow White remained frozen in the wreckage. Disney had bet big on a remake. What they got was a masterclass in what happens when marketing, casting, and messaging completely misfire. And it's hard to say how much of it was Zegler's fault, but it's even harder to argue she wasn't the accelerant. Then came the international backlash. In markets where Disney usually thrives, China, Latin America, even parts of Europe, interest was non-existent. One region reported that Snow White made less than $1 million. In the biggest markets, the film was met with silence or satire. Audiences weren't just staying home, they were making fun of it. And that global response fed right back into the US headlines. Now, it wasn't just a domestic underperformance, it was an international embarrassment. And once again, Rachel Zegler was the name attached to the narrative. Her image took a hit that extended far beyond this one film. Producers started backing off, future casting announcements slowed, long-standing partnerships paused. Even her public appearances became more carefully curated. Not canceled, but undeniably quiet. For someone who had once been positioned as the new face of Hollywood's progressive future, the silence was deafening. Meanwhile, Candace Owens continued to hammer the same points, not just about Snow White, but about the broader disconnect between Hollywood and everyday audiences. She framed Zegler as just one example of a growing pattern: actors more interested in activism than acting, studios more concerned with messaging than magic, and films that seemed to resent the very fans they relied on. Whether you agreed or not, it was hard to deny that her message was resonating, because the data backed it up. Viewers weren't showing up, merch wasn't selling, word of mouth was toxic. Even Disney's own fan base had turned on them. Not completely, but enough to leave a mark. And that's the part studios often underestimate. It's not about a few angry tweets, it's about momentum. When the public decides they're done with a film, no amount of post-production polish can save it. The trailer views, the press tour, the brand recognition, it all collapses the moment viewers lose trust. And Snow White didn't just lose trust, it lost its soul. What had started as a chance to reintroduce a timeless classic to a new generation ended up as a case study in how fast a franchise can fall apart, not because of budget, not because of bad effects, but because of a tone, a message, and a lead actress who underestimated the power of perception. By the time the box office dust settled, Snow White had officially become one of Disney's most talked about failures. Not because it quietly underperformed, but because it loudly crashed under the weight of controversy. It became a reminder to the entire industry. Legacy means something, and audiences aren't afraid to walk away when they feel mocked. For Rachel Zegler, the damage was personal and professional. Instead of becoming a breakout icon for Disney's next era, she became the cautionary tale for what happens when a star forgets who they're performing for. Whether she meant to or not, her words framed her as someone who didn't appreciate the story, didn't respect the fans, and didn't want to play the role, despite being paid millions to do it. That's what people couldn't forgive. And no amount of apologies, clarifications, or fan interviews could undo that first impression. Zegler had a moment to connect with audiences, and instead came off like she was lecturing them. Even when she tried to backpedal, offering emotional responses, teary statements, or vague apologies, it didn't land. The tone had already been set. Her public image was locked. Meanwhile, Disney had to rethink everything. Industry insiders reported stalled remake plans, internal shakeups, and reevaluations of how much creative control actors would get in future projects. Was that all because of Snow White? Maybe not. But was Snow White the final straw? Probably. Because the truth is, this film wasn't just a failure. It was a wake-up call. Hollywood had been coasting on nostalgia for years. Live-action remake after remake. Familiar titles reskinned for modern values. But Snow White proved that the formula had limits. People weren't going to keep watching just because the name was familiar. They needed heart. They needed care. They needed someone who believed in the magic, not someone who rolled their eyes at it. And maybe that's why this hit so hard. Because deep down, fans wanted this to work. They wanted to love it, to take their kids, to feel that spark again. But the film, the press, and the star made it impossible. Every layer peeled back revealed a project that felt more like a lecture than a legacy. And so the audience did what it rarely does this loudly. It rejected the product, not just by skipping it, but by roasting it, mocking it, memifying it into digital rubble. And Disney, a brand built on perfection and polish, had to stand there and watch as its golden remake turned into a punchline. As for Rachel Zegler, her career isn't over, but it's been rerouted. Her next moves will be watched, picked apart, and measured against the fallout of Snow White. Whether she bounces back or fades out depends on what she does next, and how much of the spotlight the public is willing to give her again. But one thing's for sure, she'll never be seen the same way. And Disney, they've got some serious soul-searching to do. Because if Snow White can bomb this hard, nothing is safe. Not the legacy, not the brand, not the billion-dollar machine they've been riding for years. This wasn't just about a movie. It was about a message. And whether Hollywood listens, well, we'll see. Because if they don't, this won't be the last time we watch a studio throw millions at a classic just to watch it burn. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. And don't miss our next video. And don't forget to like and subscribe.